when the waiting ends and we discover whether we've been saved or whether we've just given our executioners time to aim. Find a comfortable position. Let the weight of your body settle into wherever you're sitting or lying. Take a breath that fills your lungs completely. Then release it, letting tension drain from your shoulders, your jaw, your hands. What you're about to hear isn't designed to frighten you, though parts of it may. It's designed to prepare you, to give you knowledge that governments have decided you don't need, but that you deserve to have. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. Let the ordinary sounds around you fade into background noise. In a moment, you're going to step into a world that exists in parallel to your own. A world of contingency plans and worst-case scenarios, where brilliant minds have spent decades trying to answer one impossible question. What do we do if they come, and they don't come in peace? The story you're about to experience is constructed from leaked documents, testimony from former military personnel who broke their non-disclosure agreements because they believed the public had a right to know, and interviews with scientists who helped design detection systems that scan the cosmos every second of every day. Some names have been changed, some locations remain classified, but every element of the protocol you're about to learn is real. It exists, it's ready to be activated. And according to 3 separate sources within the defense community, we've come within hours of activating it at least twice in the last decade. So breathe, listen, and understand that the universe is far stranger and humanity far more prepared than you've been led to believe. The conference room had no windows. Major Elizabeth Chen noticed this immediately when she was escorted through 3 separate security checkpoints and into the subterranean chamber beneath Peterson Space Force Base in Colorado Springs. The year was 2018, though the events she was about to be briefed on had started 8 months earlier, in March, when the Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile picked up something that shouldn't exist. Chen had been pulled from a training exercise without explanation, flown across the country on a transport with blacked-out windows, and told only that she was being read into a program called Silent Threshold. She'd never heard the name before. The room contained 11 other people, none of whom would make eye contact with her. A woman in civilian clothes stood at the front, her face projected on a screen behind her, showing a security clearance level Chen didn't recognize. The woman didn't introduce herself. She simply began speaking, and what she said would change everything Chen thought she knew about her role in the Space Force. The signal from Atacama wasn't radio waves. It wasn't light. It was something the scientists called a gravitational whisper, a ripple in space-time, so precise, so deliberately patterned that it could only be artificial. Something was bending the fabric of reality itself to send us a message. And it was doing so from a distance of approximately 4 light-years away. The closest star system, Alpha Centauri. The message had been repeating for 8 months, growing imperceptibly stronger each day, which meant whatever was sending it was moving toward us. The woman explained that this wasn't first contact. First contact had happened 63 times since 1952, always in ways that could be explained away, always in forms that allowed for plausible deniability. Lights in the sky, radar anomalies, brief signals that disappeared before they could be confirmed. But this was different. This was undeniable, measurable, and accelerating. The object creating the gravitational signal was estimated to be the size of Manhattan, traveling at 7% the speed of light, and if it maintained its current trajectory, it would reach the outer edge of our solar system in approximately 6 years. 6 years to prepare for something humanity had never faced. Confirmed, undeniable contact with a non-human intelligence that had mastered physics we barely understood. The protocol Chen learned that day had 3 phases. The first was detection, already completed. The second was assessment, currently underway, involving every space telescope, every deep space radar installation, and every quantum sensor humanity had built, all focused on gathering data about the approaching object. And the third was response, which split into 2 distinct pathways depending on one critical determination: intent. If the assessment phase concluded that the object showed peaceful intent through specific behavioral markers the scientists had identified, then response would follow the diplomatic pathway. First contact teams would be assembled. Linguists, anthropologists, physicists, and representatives from every major nation would prepare communication protocols. Humanity would announce the arrival to the public in stages, carefully managed to prevent panic, and we would collectively prepare to greet our visitors. But if assessment concluded the object showed hostile intent, or more critically, if intent couldn't be determined, then response would follow the second pathway: silent threshold. The room went utterly quiet when the woman explained what this meant. Every nation with space capability would be notified through encrypted channels. A countdown would begin. 72 hours. During that time, every radio transmission, every radar pulse, every photon of directed energy that humanity emitted into space would cease. We would make Earth electromagnetically invisible, a dark spot in the cosmos, while the object passed the outer boundaries of our solar system. The theory was simple and terrifying. If we couldn't determine whether the visitors were peaceful, we couldn't risk revealing our exact position, our population centers, our military installations, or our level of technological development. We would go silent, completely silent, and observe. We would watch them watching us, and based on their behavior during those 72 hours, we would learn everything we needed to know about their intentions. If they continued past us, ignoring our planet, we would know they meant no harm. If they slowed, if they searched, if they showed any sign of looking for us despite our silence, we would know we were dealing with something that hunted. And then the real protocol would begin. Chen spent the next 6 months training for a role she hoped she'd never have to perform. She learned that silent threshold had sub-protocols, contingencies within contingencies, plans that accounted for dozens of scenarios the public never imagined. She learned that every major city had a designated emergency broadcast suppression team, civilians who worked normal jobs but who could, within 2 hours of activation, take control of every television station, radio broadcaster, and internet service provider in their region, not to broadcast a message, but to ensure silence. She learned that the protocol anticipated riots, panic, and complete social breakdown, and had response plans for each. She learned that certain satellites, the ones officially listed as communications relay stations, were actually weapons platforms, rail guns that could accelerate projectiles to a fraction of light speed, capable of striking targets in deep space with kinetic energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. And she learned something that made her blood run cold. We'd almost activated Silent Threshold 3 times before. Once in 1991, when a Soviet deep space tracking station detected an object decelerating as it approached Neptune. The object had vanished before confirmation, blamed officially on equipment malfunction, but the log showed it had been there for 6 hours, scanning our outer planets with some kind of directed energy before simply accelerating back into interstellar space. Once in 2004, when the Hubble Space Telescope captured images of an object near Jupiter that didn't match any known celestial body or human-made probe. The object was angular, clearly manufactured, and appeared to be collecting samples from Jupiter's atmosphere. It left after 3 days, and the images were classified so quickly that even the astronomers who'd found it had their memories of the event suppressed through a combination of non-disclosure agreements and what Chen's instructor carefully described as cognitive realignment sessions. And once, in 2016, when the Chinese National Space Administration detected a heat signature emerging from the Oort cloud, the shell of icy objects at the edge of our solar system. The signature suggested something was using our own comets as cover, moving between them, possibly hiding, possibly preparing. That object had been tracked for 11 months before it simply disappeared, either leaving our system or finding a way to mask its signature so completely that we lost it. 3 times we'd come within days of going silent. 3 times the assessment phase had concluded at the last moment that the objects posed no immediate threat or had departed on their own. But the 2018 signal was different. It wasn't hiding. It wasn't sneaking through our system. It was announcing itself, growing stronger every day. And based on the gravitational readings, it had just made a course correction, a deliberate adjustment that would bring it not toward our outer planets, but toward Earth specifically. The public knew nothing. Chen found this simultaneously comforting and horrifying. She'd pass people on the street, watch them laughing at their phones, arguing about politics, living their lives in complete ignorance of the fact that something unknown was crossing the vast emptiness between stars with Earth as its destination. The information blackout was total. No leaks, no whistleblowers. Every person read into Silent Threshold understood that revealing the program's existence was punishable not by imprisonment, but by something the briefings called permanent information quarantine, which Chen understood to mean they'd disappear. Not killed, she hoped, but removed so completely from society that they might as well be. The psychological weight was immense. She started having dreams where she was screaming at crowds of people, trying to warn them, and no sound would come from her mouth. She'd wake up with her jaw aching from clenching it all night. The program provided psychiatric support, mandatory counseling sessions twice a week with a therapist who also had clearance. The therapist told her the dreams were normal, that everyone read into the program experienced them. "You're carrying information that wants to be shared," the therapist explained. "Human beings are social creatures. Secrets create cognitive pressure, but you're strong enough to contain it."
Chen wasn't sure that was true, but she kept showing up for training because the alternative was being removed from the program, and she'd realized something important. If this happened, if Silent Threshold was activated, people with training and preparation would be the difference between controlled response and complete chaos. She needed to be ready. 3 years passed. The object continued approaching. The assessment phase expanded, incorporating data from sources Chen wasn't cleared to know about. She heard rumors of civilian telescopes being mysteriously damaged or having their funding cut if they were pointed at the wrong section of sky. She heard whispers that amateur astronomers were being recruited into the program or quietly discouraged from their hobby through means she didn't want to imagine. And she heard, though never officially, that the object had made a second course correction in late 2020 during the global pandemic when humanity was distracted and fractured. The correction was subtle but unmistakable. It was aiming for Earth's orbital path, timing its arrival for when our planet would be at a specific point in our journey around the Sun. By 2021, the object was close enough that traditional telescopes could see it, though the images were immediately classified. Chen saw one during a briefing just for 30 seconds before it was pulled from the screen. The object wasn't a ship in any sense she recognized. It looked organic, like a massive flower made of crystalline structures that caught and bent light in impossible ways. The petals, if that's what they were, seemed to rotate independently of each other, creating a mesmerizing spiral pattern that hurt to look at for too long. One of the astrophysicists in the briefing had said something that stuck with her. "It's not moving through space, it's unfolding through space, like space itself is wrapping around it." The assessment phase was reaching its conclusion. Teams of behavioral analysts, xenobiologists who'd spent their careers preparing for this moment, and AI systems designed to process non-human decision-making patterns were all working to answer the single most important question: peaceful or hostile? The problem was that every behavior the object exhibited could be interpreted either way. It wasn't communicating, which could mean it was peaceful and waiting for us to initiate contact, or hostile and maintaining operational security. It had altered its course toward Earth, which could mean it was curious about us and coming to investigate, or that it was targeting us deliberately. It was approaching slowly by cosmic standards, which could indicate caution and peaceful intent, or could be strategic positioning, getting into optimal range before revealing its true nature. The debates in the briefing rooms became heated. Chen watched senior officers nearly come to blows over interpretation of the data. Everyone knew what was at stake.
If they recommended the diplomatic pathway and were wrong, Earth could be defenseless when the object revealed hostile intent. But if they recommended silent threshold and were wrong, humanity might destroy its only chance at peaceful contact with an advanced civilization, possibly earning their hostility through our fear. The decision wasn't going to be made by consensus. It was going to be made by one person, the Director of Global Threat Assessment, a position Chen had learned existed only 2 years ago. The director had authority that superseded national governments when it came to existential threats. 14 people worldwide could veto the director's decision, but only if all 14 agreed. Otherwise, the director's word was final. And in May of 2022, the director made the call. Silent threshold was activated. Chen received the notification at 3 in the morning, a text message containing a single word, execute. She'd been expecting it, had slept in her uniform for weeks, and was at the base within 20 minutes. The operations center was chaos controlled by rigid protocol. Every station was manned. Every screen showed a different aspect of the shutdown sequence. The countdown had begun, 72 hours until the object crossed into the outer solar system.
72 hours to make Earth go dark. The first 12 hours were for notification. Encrypted messages went to every government, every space agency, every organization with the capability to emit signals into space. The messages were brief. Cease all external transmissions immediately. Await further instructions. Maintain absolute operational security. Chen watched the confirmations roll in on a massive display screen. United States? Confirmed. European Space Agency? Confirmed. China? Confirmed. Russia? Confirmed. Down the list, smaller nations, private space companies, even amateur radio operators whose equipment was powerful enough to reach beyond Earth's atmosphere. Some confirmations came instantly. Others took hours, as officials were woken up, briefings were conducted, and the magnitude of what was happening sank in. India took 6 hours to confirm, and Chen later learned it was because their prime minister had initially refused to believe the message was real, insisting it must be an elaborate hoax. He was convinced only when shown classified footage of the object, footage that had been kept from all but the highest levels of government. Japan confirmed within minutes, their response team so well prepared that Chen suspected they'd been running drills. By hour 11, every nation had confirmed. The global silence was about to begin. Hour 12 began the blackout. Every satellite in Earth's orbit capable of transmission was shut down or reoriented. Communications satellites went dark. GPS systems switched to receive-only mode. Weather satellites stopped broadcasting. The International Space Station, its 6 crew members briefed just hours before, ceased all transmissions and began a protocol that would keep them alive but completely silent for 3 days. Chen saw a note on her screen that the astronauts had been given a choice: return to Earth on an emergency descent, or stay in orbit and maintain silence. All 6 had chosen to stay, saying they wanted to be humanity's eyes in space when the object arrived. The shutdown rippled across Earth. In the first hour, it was barely noticeable. Most people didn't realize that GPS was running on cached data, that their satellite TV was showing recorded content, that the weather forecast they were checking was 12 hours old. But by hour 2, questions started emerging. Social media filled with posts about satellite outages. Technology forums buzzed with speculation about a massive solar flare or a coordinated cyber attack. The emergency broadcast suppression teams activated, not to silence these discussions, but to flood them with plausible explanations, misinformation designed to be debunked, and enough contradictory theories that no consensus could form. It was surprisingly effective. Within hours, the dominant narrative online was that a geomagnetic storm was causing temporary disruptions. Nothing to worry about, everything would be back to normal soon. News organizations, already briefed under national security orders, ran with the story. Experts were interviewed, all of them reading from carefully prepared scripts. The public accepted it because the alternative was unthinkable. Hour 15 brought the first major complication. An evangelical television network in Texas refused to shut down their satellite uplink, claiming religious freedom and insisting they had a duty to broadcast to their overseas audience. The suppression team arrived at their facility within 30 minutes. Chen watched the operation through security cameras. Federal agents, supported by local law enforcement, entered the building and physically disconnected the transmission equipment. The station's leadership was detained under emergency powers, held in what was officially termed protective custody, but which everyone understood meant they'd be held until the crisis passed. Similar operations occurred in 4 other locations globally. Each time, the response was swift, professional, and successful. By hour 18, Earth was electromagnetically dark. Every radio telescope had stopped transmitting. Every deep space radar was offline. Every attempt humanity made to touch the cosmos with our technology had ceased. We were still receiving signals, still listening, but we were no longer speaking. The silence was profound. Chen's role during the 72 hours was liaison between the military tracking stations and the civilian assessment teams. She spent hours in front of screens showing data from passive detection systems, optical telescopes, gravitational wave detectors, neutrino sensors, anything that could observe without emitting a signal. The object was visible now, a growing structure that defied easy description. The crystalline petals were actually sheets of something that bent light at angles that shouldn't be possible, creating an effect where you could see multiple views of the object simultaneously, as if it existed in several positions at once. Astrophysicists were going mad trying to explain it. One theory suggested it was a 4-dimensional object projecting into our 3-dimensional space, which would explain the impossible geometry. Another suggested it was using controlled gravitational lensing to create illusions, making itself appear stranger than it actually was, possibly to intimidate or confuse potential threats. Chen didn't care about the theories. She cared about behavior. What was the object doing? The answer? Absolutely nothing. It continued on its trajectory, neither accelerating nor decelerating, showing no response to Earth's sudden silence. This was analyzed endlessly. Was it unaware we'd gone dark? Impossible, unless their detection technology was far cruder than their propulsion, which seemed unlikely. Was it indifferent to our emissions, suggesting peaceful intent? Or was it simply confident enough that our silence didn't matter, that we could find us regardless? The debates raged in whispers, because even inside the operations center, people were speaking quietly, as if the object might somehow hear us across millions of kilometers of vacuum. Hour 24 marked the first public incident. A commercial airline pilot flying over the Pacific reported seeing something in space, visible even in daylight, a shimmer against the stars that moved wrong, too fast, and too deliberately to be natural. He reported it to air traffic control, which triggered an automated response protocol. Within minutes, every flight worldwide received a notification of unusual atmospheric conditions and instructions to inform passengers that they might see unusual optical effects over the next few days. The pilot was met on the ground by federal agents, briefed into a limited version of the program, and asked to remain silent. He agreed, shaken but understanding. But his passengers had seen it too, and some had filmed it. The video hit social media within the hour. The suppression teams went into overdrive. The videos were flagged and removed, but before they'd been shared thousands of times. Counter videos appeared showing clearly faked versions of the same phenomenon, designed to make the real footage seem just like another hoax. Experts appeared on news programs explaining it was a rare aurora effect caused by the same geomagnetic activity that was disrupting satellites. The strategy worked, mostly. The videos became just another internet mystery, debated and then forgotten as the next trend emerged. But Chen knew it was only a matter of time. The object was getting closer, becoming visible to more people, and soon it would be impossible to hide. The protocol accounted for this. Phase 2 of Silent Threshold was scheduled to begin at hour 36, limited public disclosure. At hour 36, the president appeared on television. The broadcast was carried on every channel, every streaming service, every device capable of displaying video. Chen watched it with 100 other personnel in the operations center, everyone silent as the most powerful person in the world tried to explain the inexplicable without causing mass panic. The president was calm, almost eerily so. He explained that an object of unknown origin was passing through our solar system. He emphasized that it showed no hostile behavior, that Earth was not in danger, but that as a precautionary measure, certain communication systems had been temporarily shut down to minimize the risk of accidental interference with the object's trajectory. It was masterful misdirection. The president made it sound like we were protecting the object from us, not the other way around.
He assured everyone that the situation was under control, that international cooperation was total, and that normal operations would resume within 48 hours. Then he said something that Chen knew was carefully calculated. We are not alone in the universe. This object is proof of that. But we must approach this moment with caution and wisdom. In the coming hours, you may see things in the sky that seem unusual. Don't be afraid. Be amazed. Be curious. But most importantly, be calm. Humanity is ready for this. The global reaction was impossible to predict or control. Some people celebrated, dancing in the streets, convinced this was humanity's great awakening. Others panicked, flooding grocery stores, withdrawing cash, preparing for the end of the world. Religious leaders offered prayers and interpretations, some calling it a divine sign, others warning of demons from the sky. Scientists not read into the program scrambled to point their instruments at the object, only to find that the coordinates being circulated online were deliberately wrong, leading them to empty sections of space. The real location remained classified. Chen saw reports of suicide spikes, domestic violence increases, and spontaneous gatherings where thousands of people simply stood together, holding hands, waiting. The psychological impact was immense. Humanity had always wondered if we were alone. Now we knew, and knowing changed everything. The operations center tracked it all: social media sentiment, crowd movements, emergency response calls, everything that might indicate how the species was handling the revelation. Teams of sociologists and psychologists analyzed the data, looking for patterns, trying to predict whether humanity would hold together or fragment. The consensus was tentative. We were staying mostly intact, helped by the fact that the disclosure had been framed as a passing encounter rather than an invasion. People were scared but not terrified, excited but not hysterical. It was a delicate balance, and everyone knew it could tip either way.
Hour 48 brought the first change in the object's behavior. It decelerated, not dramatically, but measurably. The change was small enough that it might have been natural variation, orbital mechanics adjusting to the gravitational influence of our sun. But the timing was suspicious. Exactly 48 hours after Earth went silent, exactly 12 hours after the public disclosure. The assessment teams went into emergency session. Was this a response to our silence, evidence that the object was intelligent and reactive? Or was it responding to the President's broadcast, proving they could detect our electromagnetic emissions despite our best efforts to shut them down? Or was it pure coincidence, a scheduled maneuver that happened to align with our timeline? Every theory had implications. If they were responding to our silence, it suggested they'd noticed our normal emissions and found their absence meaningful. That implied they'd been watching us long before we detected them, studying our electromagnetic signature. If they were responding to the broadcast, it meant our silence had been pointless, that they could detect us regardless, and we just revealed that we were hiding from them. Either scenario was terrifying in its own way. The director ordered an emergency protocol. Complete analysis of the object's trajectory change compared against every model of gravitational influence in the solar system. If the deceleration couldn't be explained by natural forces, it was definitive proof of intelligent control responding to events on Earth. The analysis took 6 hours. 6 hours of the most intense scientific work Chen had ever witnessed. Teams of physicists and orbital mechanics specialists running calculations, checking and rechecking their math, arguing over decimal points that could mean the difference between natural and artificial. The conclusion came at hour 54. The deceleration was artificial. The object had fired some kind of thruster or manipulated its gravitational field to slow its approach. It was under intelligent control, and that control was reacting to something. Earth remained silent. The protocol was clear. 72 hours of complete electromagnetic darkness, no exceptions. But Chen could see the strain on everyone's faces, the urge to reach out, to communicate, to say something to whoever or whatever was piloting that impossible structure was almost overwhelming. We'd spent centuries shouting into the void, hoping for an answer. Now something was answering, and we were deliberately not listening. Hour 60 marked a discovery that changed everything. One of the deep space optical telescopes, using passive imaging that emitted no signals, captured something extraordinary. The object was deploying smaller structures, dozens of them, each about the size of a school bus. They were emerging from the crystalline petals like seeds from a flower, and they were spreading out in a pattern that the AI analysis systems recognized immediately, a search grid. The object was looking for something. The smaller structures were scanning our solar system, sweeping through the asteroid belt, examining the moons of Jupiter, probing the ice fields of the Kuiper belt. They were systematic, thorough, and clearly following a programmed search pattern. And with each hour, they were getting closer to Earth. The assessment teams reached a unanimous conclusion. Hostile intent could no longer be ruled out. Either the object was searching for resources to extract, which would make Earth a target, or it was searching for something specific, possibly us, possibly something else. Either way, the behavior indicated purpose and determination, not the casual curiosity of peaceful explorers. The director initiated Protocol 7, a contingency that existed only in classified documents. 7 was the point of no return. If activated, It meant humanity was preparing not for contact, but for defense. Every weapons platform in orbit was brought online, not broadcasting, but ready. The kinetic railguns Chen had learned about years ago were armed and targeted. Nuclear missiles in silos across 5 continents were prepared for unconventional launch, straight up, designed to detonate in space rather than on Earth. And something new, something Chen hadn't known existed until that moment. A network of ground-based directed energy weapons, lasers powerful enough to be visible from orbit, all aimed at calculated intercept points. If the smaller structures entered Earth's orbital space, if they showed any aggressive behavior, humanity would respond with every weapon we built to defend ourselves. The countdown continued. Hour 66 brought an unexpected transmission, not from the object, but from the International Space Station. One of the astronauts, a Russian cosmonaut named Dmitry Sokolov, broke protocol and sent a brief message on an emergency frequency. 3 words: "They are beautiful." The transmission was intercepted immediately, but not before it had bounced off Earth's atmosphere and propagated into space. Earth's silence was broken. The operations center erupted. Sokolov had just done the one thing the protocol absolutely forbade. He'd announced our presence, confirmed we were here and aware of the object. The response was swift. Communication with the station was re-established just long enough to inform the crew that they would be detained upon return to Earth, and that all decisions about further transmissions would be made from the ground. But the damage, if it was damage, was done. For the next 3 hours, every sensor system humanity possessed was focused on one question: how would the object respond to Sokolov's transmission? The answer came at hour 69. The smaller structures stopped their search pattern.
All of them simultaneously reoriented. They weren't pointing at Earth exactly, but at a spot in space where Earth would be in approximately 6 hours, accounting for orbital motion. They knew where we were. They'd known all along. And now they were making it clear that they knew we knew. The psychological warfare, if that's what it was exquisite. By not responding directly to the transmission, but by changing their behavior in a way that indicated awareness, they demonstrated intelligence, restraint, and power simultaneously. They were saying, "We heard you, we know where you are, and we're choosing how and when to respond." The director made a decision that Chen knew would be debated for generations. With 72 hours nearly complete, with Earth's silence about to end anyway, and with the object clearly aware of our presence, there was no point in continuing to hide. At hour 70, Earth spoke. Not chaotically, not with millions of competing voices, but with one message, carefully prepared, broadcast on every frequency we could generate. The message was simple: we are here. We see you. We mean no harm. We hope you feel the same. It was transmitted in binary, in prime number sequences, in mathematical constants, in every form of potentially universal language we'd devised. And then we waited. The final 2 hours of the protocol were the longest of Chen's life. The object continued its approach, now clearly aimed at Earth's orbital space. The smaller structures formed a formation around it, a protective shell, or perhaps an exploratory vanguard. And then, at hour 71, they answered. Not with radio waves or light, but with gravity itself. The message came as a series of gravitational pulses,
gentle ripples in space-time that every sensor on Earth detected simultaneously. The pulses were patterned, clearly deliberate, and the AI systems began translating immediately. The translation took 18 minutes. 18 minutes during which humanity held its breath, waiting to learn whether we just made first contact with friends or enemies. The message, when it finally rendered, was not what anyone expected. It wasn't a greeting, it wasn't a threat, it was a question. And the question was simple. Do you remember? Do we remember what? The confusion in the operations center was total. Remember what? Our own history? Some previous contact we'd forgotten? A message we'd sent into space decades ago? The assessment team scrambled to understand, pulling up records of every message humanity had ever transmitted, every probe we'd launched, every deliberate attempt at contact. Nothing matched. Nothing explained the question. And then, one of the civilian scientists, a woman Chen had never met before, said something that silenced the room. What if it's not asking about something we forgot? What if it's asking if we remember something we never knew we knew? It was a disturbing thought, implying that humanity had encountered these beings before, long enough ago that it had passed out of recorded history and into myth. Or worse, that we'd been made to forget, that previous contact had been deliberately erased from our collective memory. The director ordered an immediate response. After frantic debate, the message sent back was honest. We don't understand. Please explain. The object's response came faster this time, just minutes instead of hours. Another gravitational pulse, more complex, carrying more information. The AI systems worked to decode it, but this time they had help. The message included a visual component, somehow encoded in the gravitational waves themselves, a technique physics said shouldn't be possible, but clearly was. The image appeared on every screen in the operations center. It showed Earth, but not modern Earth. The continents were in different positions, the climate was different, and in the sky above the planet hung dozens of structures like the one approaching us now. The image was dated by stellar positions visible in the background, approximately 65 million years ago, the end of the Cretaceous period, the time of the dinosaurs' extinction. The implications crashed over Chen like a physical wave. These beings had been here before. They'd been here when dinosaurs walked the earth, and something they'd done, or something that had happened during their visit, had coincided with the greatest mass extinction in Earth's history. Were they responsible? Had they caused it deliberately or accidentally? Or had they tried to stop it and failed? The message continued, more images flowing in gravitational pulses, the beings showing their technology, their ships landing on prehistoric Earth, showing creatures that might have been dinosaurs or might have been something else entirely, creatures that seemed aware, possibly intelligent, and then showing fire from the sky, and asteroid impact, and the beings leaving, their ships departing as Earth burned. The final image was a question mark, rendered in a form that transcended language, a symbol of inquiry that any species capable of abstract thought would understand. They were asking, "Do you remember us? Have you found evidence of our visit? Do your myths and legends carry traces of our presence?" The truth was, we hadn't. Either they covered their tracks too well, or 65 million years was simply too long for any evidence to survive in recognizable form. Earth's geology had been recycled through plate tectonics, fossils had been scattered and destroyed, and any artifacts they might have left had been ground to dust by time. We'd found the asteroid impact, the iridium layer, the mass extinction, but we'd never found any hint that the dinosaurs had been visited by beings from beyond our world. Until now. The director authorized a response, and this time it was longer, more complex. We explained our history, brief as it was compared to the timescales involved. We showed them what we learned about our planet's past, the fossil record, the geological evidence. We admitted we had no memory of their previous visit, no legends or myths that clearly matched what they were describing. And then we asked our own question. Why did you come before? Why have you come back? The answer arrived at hour 72. The protocol was complete. Earth's silence had ended, and what we learned in that final message would reshape everything humanity thought we knew about our place in the universe.
The object's response was extensive, rich with information that would take months to fully process. But the core message was clear. They were gardeners, or something analogous to that concept. They traveled between stars, visiting worlds where life was emerging, nurturing it, protecting it, helping it evolve. They'd been doing this for millions of years, visiting hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. They'd come to Earth 65 million years ago and found something remarkable: intelligent dinosaurs. Not all dinosaurs, but a specific species that had begun to develop tool use, social structures, possibly even primitive language. The beings had been observing them, studying them, preparing to make formal contact when the asteroid was detected. They'd tried to stop it, using technology that could deflect smaller objects, but proved insufficient against something that large, moving that fast. The impact was inevitable, and the beings had been forced to watch as the world they'd been nurturing burned. They'd left, believing that Earth's experiment with intelligence had ended, that it would be millions of years before another species evolved the capability for abstract thought. But they'd set up monitoring systems, gravitational sensors that would alert them if complex civilizations emerged again. Those sensors had been triggered by our radio emissions in the early 20th century, and they'd immediately begun the long journey back. They were returning to see what had emerged from the ashes of the world they'd failed to save. They wanted to know if we were the descendants of those ancient intelligent dinosaurs, somehow surviving and evolving, or if we were something entirely new. They were coming not as conquerors or colonizers, but as witnesses, as the only beings in the galaxy who remembered that Earth had been home to intelligence before humans, and who wanted to see what intelligence had become.